Do you believe in God?
I believe there's some explanation for this universe, which you might call God.
Elon Musk once claimed he would be among the first to know if there was a God out there watching over us, and he has done just that. He recently hinted at a celestial body in outer space as where God lives, with stellar features that closely align with the biblical description of what heaven looks like. Could his claims be true? And what have NASA's experts said about this mysterious celestial body? Join us as we unravel the many mysteries of Earendel, the famous place where God lives. The place believed to be where God lives. For many Christians, what often comes to mind when they hear about the bright morning star is the popular passage in the Bible's book of Revelation, where the Son of God openly identified himself by that title right after establishing his home in heaven as King of the universe. But to the less believing scientists at NASA, it points back to something very different. For these experts, it is Earendel, a cosmic heavenly body that was recently discovered and is currently being studied through the James Webb Telescope. This bright object was so beautiful and majestic that the scientists at NASA called it the Morning Star, named after the famous title from the Bible because of how its beauty couldn't be explained by anything we knew at the time. Earendel, NASA's morning star, is almost as old as the universe, making waves across the internet and often referred to by Elon Musk and many astronomers as the place where God lives. And here is why. Earendel existed over 13 billion years before life began on Earth. It is located at the edge of the universe, implying that it was formed right after the birth of the cosmos. And though scientists estimate that it is 13 billion years old and just 800,000 years younger than the universe, recent evidence suggests the morning star might be much older than that. It also seems odd that Earendel shines as the brightest among the much bigger stars in its galaxy, the Sunrise Arc. Scientists call this gravitational lensing, a situation that occurs when the force of gravity forces the surrounding brighter lights to give way to the much lesser ones. But this is quite unusual for a star that is far smaller than most of the others in the Sunrise Arc. Elon and many others believe it might be the universe naturally hinting at the importance of this star, arguing that Earendel is a stellar home so majestic that all the greater cosmic bodies allow it to shine the brightest. Not so much has been revealed by NASA about this celestial wonder, but it made waves within many scientific and religious communities, particularly within Christian circles. As far as they know, Earendel is a divine location within the universe, a physical place from which the divine being observes his creation, so it is no wonder Elon's statement about it made headlines. Some even believe it was the beautiful star that hinted at the birth of Christ over 2,000 years ago. But for many space enthusiasts outside the Christian circles, it is like history repeating itself, pointing back to an article published by Weekly World News in 1994. This article claimed NASA had spotted heaven and proved it through a highly edited image that was later proven as fake. This almost made the religion a laughingstock, and with many similar claims surrounding Elon Musk and NASA's famous morning star, many believe the same comedy is about to unfold yet again. So to reveal what makes Earendel much different, stay with us as we examine the scientific details and religious significance of this wonderful discovery. The road to Earendel's discovery. The long road to Earendel's recent discoveries in late 2024 traces back to the mid-90s, plagued by countless mistakes and misconceptions. At that time, the Hubble Space Telescope had been in space for just 5 years. It was launched in 1990 to give detailed pictures of what outer space was like, and from the first month after launch until late March of 1995, it captured and sent beautiful pictures of various nebulae and galaxies, and scientists were excited with everything they got from the space telescope. Expectations were high, and the future seemed bright, but no one's wildest imagination could have predicted what came next. On April 1st of that year, the experts at NASA received an image from the Hubble Space Telescope. The photograph felt less like a discovery and more like an April Fool's joke, as it only showed amazing things that looked impossible. In all the photographs were 3 large pillars of dust, a trinity of long-standing clouds aligned too well to have been a natural coincidence. And that was not even the strangest part. According to reports, the picture was so difficult to explain that it took 6 months for the scientists to make sense of what they saw before announcing it to the public. At the end of their study, just days before the announcement, the experts officially called those strange clouds the pillars of creation, named after a famous sermon given by one of the great Christian apologists of the previous century, Charles Spurgeon. The experts did this because they believed new stars were being formed within the fog. Believing they had solved the mystery and figured it out, Jeff Hester and Paul Scowen, the astronomers in charge of this discovery, decided to unveil what they had been studying to the public. They were from Arizona State University and were excited to show the world all they had learned. They hoped their discovery would help people understand how stars are formed and how they affect their surroundings. The photograph was unveiled to the world on November 2nd, and public reaction was much different from what they had expected. At first, the reaction was what they hoped it would be, as the picture quickly grew famous for its stunning beauty and mysterious allure. But it was at that point that things went downhill. It turned out that naming those clouds the pillars of creation was a huge mistake, as the image alone was interpreted by many as part of the celestial city mentioned in the Bible. The term itself was once used by a famous preacher from the 19th century, whose writings were still held in high regard. This famous preacher, known to many as Charles Spurgeon, once wrote about the pillars that formed and upheld the universe, linking them to active, ongoing divine creation. Now, NASA's scientists were talking about visible large pillars in space that were currently forming stars as active agents in creation, and that was all the proof people needed. With various headlines stating that NASA had found heaven in space, the news spread like wildfire. Many internet forums and media outlets talked about this, leading many to believe NASA's next step was sending astronauts to heaven to see things for themselves when no one had gone past the moon. Realizing their mistake, Jeff Hester and Paul Scowen had to go public yet again to make things right. They explained to the public that the pillars of creation were natural clumps of gas and dust formed by the energy given off by young stars. But even with this explanation, it seemed many people weren't convinced. Or better yet, they didn't want to be convinced. It felt better to believe what sounded more exciting, and because of this, stories of the pillars of creation being part of heaven's celestial city thrived for decades, even to this day. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, as the previous year had much bigger stories of heaven in space. Here is how it went. About 6 days before Valentine's that year, Weekly World News, a famous tabloid at the time, published a story that claimed NASA's Hubble Space Telescope had taken pictures of heaven in space. It featured a high-resolution image of a big white city floating in space. Despite the absurdity of the claim, it got many people excited, and it spread so fast that every news outlet was talking about it the next day. Things got so serious that NASA had to put out a statement confirming the image is fake. Further investigation showed that the front page photo was just a piece of artwork edited into a background image obtained from the Hubble Space Telescope and put out as front page material to sell more newspapers. Weekly World News back then was known for putting out highly exaggerated stories that never happened. Most of their top stories were accounts of encounters with aliens, monsters, and demons. And this story was just one of the many tales that were put out at the time. But little did they know that fiction was about to become reality. Finding the morning star. Over 20 years passed before the famous Hubble Space Telescope sent another set of unbelievable images to NASA's observatories. This time, they were pictures of a very distant group of stars they believed were almost as old as the universe. This galaxy was 13 billion light-years away from us, meaning that what they saw in 2016 through the Hubble Space Telescope was what the galaxy looked like not long after the universe was formed 14 billion years ago. For the scientists at NASA, it was like looking back in time to know what the universe looked like right after the Big Bang, and were excited to know more about this very old galaxy. But there was a problem. The galaxy was too far for the telescope to capture in good detail. But all hope wasn't lost, as the experts discovered that the distant galaxy could act as a gravitational lens, allowing other galaxies and stars behind it to show in greater size and detail due to its magnifying effect. This meant they could see a much older galaxy past the one they had been observing for months, and it was very exciting. About a month later, the newly discovered galaxy was captured in good detail by Dan Coe, a renowned physicist and astronomer, in late 2016.
And the brightest image there is about the same brightness as Pascal's galaxy there.
It was named the Sunrise Arc, and almost 3 years later, in early 2019, NASA's experts took another look at the latest images of the galaxy and noticed something even more unusual. They noticed a glowing spot that was very bright, but didn't qualify to be a galaxy or a cluster of stars. Nobody was sure what it was until another famous astronomer, Brian Welch, led a special team to find out what it was. They compared multiple pictures, trying to understand through different advanced techniques to study the light patterns in the photographs. For 3 years, they studied these pictures diligently, putting them through different filters to determine the color and nature of the sunrise arc to decipher what the glowing spot was. And it wasn't until March 2022 when the team concluded that the bright spot was a single star. Knowing this, the experts were surprised by how bright it shone in the presence of much larger clusters and galaxies containing billions of stars that were much larger by comparison. Unable to come up with an explanation for why this single star was outshining whole galaxies at the moment, they named the bright star Earendel, an old term that translates to morning star. This term was once used by Christ to describe himself in the last book of the Bible, and it wasn't the first time astronomers used terms from the Bible to name celestial bodies that defy explanation. For example, the planet Venus was named in the 1st century with the same meaning as Earendel, except it was also used in referring to Lucifer, the light bringer mentioned in the Bible's book of Isaiah. And the universe's oldest planet in the Scorpius constellation was named Methuselah in 2003, after the oldest man in the Bible, famously known as the human who lived for almost 1,000 years. Further studies were carried out by experts through 2023 into the following year, but their next major discoveries were more tragic than exciting. Earendel's natural origins and possible end. Early 2024 was both an exciting and heartbreaking time for Brian Welch and Don Coe, the astronomers who discovered the famous pillars of creation and the beautiful morning star. They weren't openly believers in God, even though they named both discoveries after various aspects of the Christian faith. But what they discovered made them wish Earendel was actually the biblical manifestation of heaven. All natural explanations proved what they feared all along, and finding out they were right almost hurt. Simply put, if their conclusions are true, then it is highly unlikely that Earendel still exists today. But if Earendel really is God's dwelling place, chances are that it is still alive and glowing as we see it now. But according to Brian and Don, for a star its size, Earendel could have lived for less than 10 billion years after it was formed before ending its life in a massive supernova. What we see today is what it looked like 13 billion years ago, as that is the amount of time it takes for light to travel from its location to where we are today. Based on its size and glowing properties, this is what they concluded. Less than a billion years after the Big Bang, huge masses of dust and gas began to clump together to form a small nebula. This cloud of gas and dust was mostly made up of hydrogen, the simplest and most common element in the universe back then. Over time, the force of gravity caused parts of the hydrogen cloud to start clumping together, generating great amounts of heat in the process. As the large clump grew bigger, the innermost part squeezed in on itself, gradually becoming hot enough to start a nuclear reaction. This reaction, known as nuclear fusion, began to smash hydrogen atoms together to form helium. Over time, this process began to produce light, leading to the birth of Earendel. At this point, the morning star was a small ball of hot gases in the middle of the much larger nebula. As nuclear fusion continued over millions of years, Earendel grew even larger, hotter, and brighter. The energy from the nuclear fusion pushed against gravity, trying to squeeze in the star, causing Earendel to reach balance as a full-grown celestial body. Unlike our sun, Earendel grew into a much larger size before stabilizing. This meant it must have had a very short lifespan, as larger stars tend to burn their fuel much faster than smaller stars. Unlike our yellow sun, Earendel was blue in color, typical for most stars as large as it was. It only appears red in popular photographs from space due to the long distance that stretches out light waves before they reach us. Over 500 million years passed before the presence of another star could have been observed from a close perspective. This new celestial body, commonly known as a companion star, was much smaller and cooler than Earendel. It was about the size and color of our sun, and like the average planet, it rotated around Earendel for over 1 million years. During this time, it exchanged huge masses of energy with Earendel, forming a large disk of gas and dust that slowly spiraled into the companion star. The more it got absorbed by the companion star, the bigger it grew over time, slowly becoming massive and able to hold its own. But even with the companion star collecting more matter than it gave back, that was not enough to make Earendel last for much longer, as it was quickly running out of the gases needed to keep itself alive. After just 3 million years, Earendel ran out of hydrogen at its core, making it start to collapse under its gravity as it got much hotter than usual. To keep itself alive for as long as possible, the star began to fuse heavier elements like helium, carbon, and oxygen. This ran out a lot more quickly, and with nothing left to keep it alive, Earendel could no longer support the weight of its outer layers, leading to a sudden collapse. This caused a huge explosion known as a supernova, releasing a great amount of energy that stripped away some of the outer layers of the companion star. Thanks to the long enough distance between both stars, the companion star was able to survive, but it went through a lot of changes on its own, beginning to spin at a higher velocity, and the building gravity caused surrounding masses of dust to form around it. Over millions of years, the masses of stellar debris from Earendel slowly clumped into larger bodies moving around the star, gradually forming a new solar system with planets and satellites. The rest of Erendel's debris traveled through the cosmos until they got captured by the gravity of other large bodies in space, until they became part of different planets and stars at various places in the known universe. This massive outburst spread out masses of elements that would travel through space and become the building blocks of different planets. This is how the elements needed for life spread through the universe. Stars are born, they glow, and they die, leaving behind the building blocks of life that make up all the living things we see around us. We can say that like the billions of stars that existed before life began on Earth, Earendel gave itself up so we can be here, as the materials that make life possible were obtained from its destruction. From the oxygen we breathe in to keep ourselves alive to the carbon that makes up all living materials, the results of its existence is everywhere. Earendel was a star so majestic it made everyone believe heaven was for real. But if that were true, what would it look like up close? Let's find out what heaven looks like. One cannot help having wild imaginations while learning about this star. It is one of the few natural things that allow faith and science to merge as one. A mere glimpse of Earendel from a close perspective almost feels magical. Although it is the farthest known star from our solar system, the single light it gives almost rivals the collective light given by billions of stars joined together. It also feels magical that what we see today is exactly how it was 13 billion years ago, making it seem like a hopeful message to us from the beginning of time, much like how many religious people see God in their personal lives. The fact that an entire galaxy acts as a gravitational lens to make this star shine as brightly as entire clusters of stars feels like a heavenly intervention, pointing all creation towards the throne and dwelling place of their creator. Even from a strictly scientific standpoint, there are many things to marvel about. For one, Earendel is a massive B star, which means it is much hotter, larger, and brighter than our sun. The morning star's surface temperature is at least 4 times hotter than the sun's and is at least 1 million times brighter without the gravitational lens effect. Our sun is a much smaller G-type main sequence star and is much cooler than Earendel. While the sun is 4.6 billion years old, Earendel was formed when the universe was still very young. Nobody would have known it even existed if not for the magnifying effect of other celestial bodies. Thanks to this magnifying effect, Earendel's light was amplified over 40,000 times, making it shine almost as brightly as the galaxies surrounding it. This makes many wonder what Earendel would look like up close if it were truly divine. For one, if it were divine, chances are that it would still be there today, as heaven, by definition, is the eternal dwelling place of an eternal creator. Also, it is highly unlikely that we would know what it looked like from a close perspective, even if we had the technologies to even go there, as the much greater gravity than anything in our solar system would crush anything remotely close to it. As for how the Bible describes heaven, it speaks of a physical celestial city with streets of transparent gold, a place where the laws of entropy do not exist. By this effect, The principles of death and sickness cannot exist in this world. And the book of Revelation tells us that the celestial city would not dwell in space, but would come down to earth. Christ, the living morning star, would live and rule over his creation as king, shining so bright that his glory replaces the sun. Of course, many people don't believe this, but as far as Elon Musk is concerned, Earendel points us to this reality, remembered by many astronomers as the star that brought heaven to life. So what do you think? Is Earendel a shadow of the real heaven, or is it just another dead star in the vast cosmos? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.